Respected friends, ladies and gentlemen, today's lecture or today's discussion is around the steps in scientific research. We have already discussed what is the scientific knowledge, what is the general knowledge, what are the distinguishing factors between the two kind of knowledges. These we have already discussed. Today we are going to discuss what are the steps in scientific research. Science, what is science? Everything which is systematic is science. And what is systematic? Everything which is done step by step is systematic. So, the scientific research requires that each and every step of the research must be very clearly mentioned, not only mentioned but implemented. We cannot jump from one step to say 10th step or 3rd step, or we cannot jump from simply introduction to the conclusion. We have to take into care each and every step in the scientific research. So, scientific research is systematic. It is a systematic exercise. It's not haphazard. It's not unsystematic. It does not run according to our wishes. It will not be done according to our wishes or what we want. No, the scientific research wants or requires that the research must be a systematic exercise. That is, exercise which is done step by step, and beginning from the introduction, every step is taken into care. No step is left untouched, and this goes up to the conclusion, up to the formulation. In between, we cannot jump any step. We have to, in fact, take into care it very sincerely, because without the systematic effort, without the step by step effort, the research will become confusing. It would become something which would not be clear to any other person. So, we have to ensure that the research is done in a systematic way, that is, it is done step by step. So, what are those steps which have to be followed in doing a research? We must know it. We must be in knowledge of it. If we are unaware ourselves of the steps that are involved in our research process, then we are going to mess with our research exercise, with our research process. So it is very necessary to find what are the required steps for a scientific research, so that a systematic exercise, and so that it really fulfills the requirements of a scientific research. The discussion which we are going to follow today is based on that. We will be discussing the various steps which are necessary for implementing our research exercise to the problem that we have chosen, to the phenomenon that we have chosen to do research upon. So, the first step is the defining of the problem. Defining is the first step. It is very important step. If we have not defined our problem, then we are groping in the dark. So, if a person wants to build the house, he does not know where his land exists, how much his land exists, so he is groping in the dark. Any problem which we have chosen, it has to be defined properly, defined in scientific terms. In fact, we would have a proper full-fledged one lecture discussion on the defining of the problem. Today we would be restricting ourselves only with a kind of introduction to the defining of the problem, although it requires more than a full lecture to discuss how do we define the problem or the issue that we are going to discuss. So, in this defining of the problem, that is the first step of the scientific research. We have to select the problem. Which problem should be selected? How should it be selected? These are the issues which we shall be discussing in any class which is totally dedicated to the defining of the problem. But today we must be clear that the researcher has to select the problem in a very rational way, and he has to formulate it so that it becomes worth researching. The formulation is very necessary, because we do not define, if we do not formulate the problem, we will be groping in the dark. So, it's like a physician. A physician, when a patient comes to him, he checks him, and also he or she, the physician, sees to all the symptoms from which the patient is suffering, and based on that he or she recommends the various tests that the patient has to undergo. That is the first step of the patient and doctor, a doctor attending a patient. A researcher is not less than a physician to the problem. To a doctor, the problem is of diseases of the human beings, but to a researcher, he has to deal with diseases of all over the world. Not only that, most complex is dealing with the problems of the society, the social problems. So, any researcher, whether it is from science or social science, he has to define the problem correctly so that the researcher knows what the problem exactly is. If we do not know the problem, then how do we proceed ahead? Suppose we want to do research on productivity of, say, of a land, then we have to go to the land and know about the land, what are its problem, whether it is lowland, highland, or whether it is surrounded by trees. What is the problem? Or so if we know the problem of the land, then only we can study the productivity of the land. And if we are unaware of the particular situation or condition in which the land is situated, how can we proceed with the research? Similarly, with the other kind of problems, the problem of, say, school leaving children, it is a problem. Thousands of children in our country, they join the school, and based on various factors, they have to leave school in between without completion of their certificate or completion of their school period. What is the problem? We have to go and find the problem at hand. Otherwise, by sitting in the chair, we cannot find what is the problem of those students who leave the school. Maybe it is pressure from the parents who want their children to join child labor. Maybe there is problem with the children that in agriculture seasons they have to join their parents for harvesting and other kind of jobs in the rural areas, or the family is such an acute problem that there is nobody who is a bread earner. There may be various factors. So, before we start the research, the first step should be to exactly diagnose and define what the problem is, exactly the problem is. If we are able to state the problem, then it is said that a problem well stated is half solved. And the defining of the problem will relieve us from collecting the irrelevant data. Like we observed that the doctor first checked the patient and then he recommended certain tests which were relevant for the patient, because there are thousands of tests. So the relevant tests for the patient were recommended. So similarly, when we define the problem, say problem of drug addiction, problem of divorce in the society, problem of school leaving children, problem of crime, problem of poverty, if we are able to define and state the problem properly, then our problem, our solution to the problem will ease, and we will be saved from collecting the irrelevant data, and we will be knowing the relevant data that is required for the, because we are not going to do research in vacuum. We are going to do research not in vacuum, but we are going to do research in around the problem. And there may be many people who might have worked around or about the problem, if not exactly on the problem, similar problem, some similar problem, or a problem which is very similar or close to this problem. So we have to search for all the works that have been already done on and around the topic of our research, that is our problem. It gives us ideas, it gives us reviews. When we go through all this literature, then this is very helpful, because it gives us ideas, it gives us questions to be resolved, and it provides us with the conceptual framework, with the data, type of data we have to have, where to have, primary, secondary, the sources where we have to collect, the process which should be adopted to collect such data. These are all going to be given by the literature review. And not only that, the literature review provides us the conceptual framework, the analytic framework of analyzing the data. That is also very important. We would find suitable statistical instrument, or we would find suitable conceptual framework to analyze our data. And the most important thing is that the literature review would provide us the research gap in our study, because if we are repeating the same kind of work which already has been done by other people, then it is wastage of time and resources. So we must be very careful that the research that we are going to undertake must have some gap. Then only we can acquire some fresh knowledge, new knowledge, because research is not a repetition. Research is not repeating the work which has already been done by the other people. If we do that, it does not have, we may get some degree, but it does not have academic market, academic value in the academic market, because there are already many people who have already done on various aspects or all aspects of this issue or problem. So we have to be very particular, that very careful, that if we wish or we aspire that our research has a very good value in the academic market, is well known nationally and internationally, then we have to go for some new knowledge, additional knowledge to the already existing stock of knowledge on the subject of research that we have undertaken. So we have to see to it that there does exist some gap in the research which we are going to undertake. The research gap is very important to mention. If we are unable to mention the research gap, then the research would remain with limitations. And of course, if there is no research gap, why should we waste our resources financially and the human resources? We have to find the gap which our research is going to fill with the new knowledge or with the addition of new knowledge on the existing stock of knowledge on the subject of research that we have undertaken, on the problem of research that we have undertaken, and this would come from the literature review. So the literature review is also a very important step in the scientific research. The third step that is required in the research is the formulation of hypothesis. Hypothesis is very important. We begin from that. We postulate a relation. We hypothesize a relation which affects the phenomena. And again, I told you, like in the previous sections, that this hypothesis also we will be discussing in detail in future classes, maybe in 1, 2 or 3 classes, as according to our limits. But setting up of the hypothesis is one of the important steps in the scientific research. This is a kind of tentative assumption. It's not final assumption. It's a kind of tentative assumption. We, of course, we do not set up the hypothesis again in vacuum. We have some idea from the literature review, and based on that, we propose, we have the proposition, we set up the hypothesis. The hypothesis is to be either tested, either to be rejected or to be accepted. The hypothesis is very important for the research, because then only we can establish a relation or reject a relation between the phenomena and the causes or the factors that cause the phenomena. Next step is the research design. What is research design? Research design is a plan. Research design is something like a blueprint of our research. When we build a house, we go to the architect. The architect gives us the plan from base to the top, from the foundation to the ceiling. Each nitty gritty of the house building is planned by the architect, and when he has this handed over to us, we go according to that. We do not have to think on every step. We know what has to be done where, what next, and the work goes smoothly. Similarly is the research design. In research design, we discuss what is the study about. We clearly explain why the study is being done, where the study will be carried out, what kind of data is required, how do we locate the data, how do we collect the data, which process of data collection we have decided. It has to be decided in advance, because there are various types of collections of the data. So we have to decide from that. If we do not decide, then we will be confused what to do. Everything is planned from very beginning. How much time it would take, how much time each step should take. This comes into design. Also, what could be the analytic framework, what would be the conceptual framework, how data would be processed, how to process the data, how to edit it, how to code it, how to tabulate it, how the graphical representation would be done. All these questions have to be answered by the research design. And not only that, how the research report would be written, which kind of referencing style would be adopted, which how the bibliography would be presented. All these are the issues which are to be mentioned, which are to be planned in advance, and which would be termed as the design of the research. Then the next item is the collection of the data. Next step in the collection of data is the collection of data in scientific research. We have discussed the 4 steps. This is the 5th step. We have to collect the data. Which data? Primary or secondary? If there is primary, then for it there are various other methods. If it is secondary, then there are methods for it. And why? That is also to be justified, because there are problems which would require only secondary data. The primary data is impossible to be achieved. There are problems which require only primary data, and so only primary data is to be collected. So we have to decide from the very beginning, and this is called also the statistical design. The statistical design takes care of all these issues. How to, which kind of type of data, which kind of data, these kind of issues. So that is the 5th step. Also, we have to, if we are collecting the sample, because if the population is very large, then we cannot go for collecting data, each and every data from each and every respondent. It is impossible. So for that, suppose if we are working on the Indian migrants in GCC countries, then what do? We cannot contact all the 9 million Indian workers in Gulf countries. We have to go for sample. How to make the sample? There are various types of sampling techniques, which again we shall be discussing in due course. So this design, this is called sample design also. So this design would provide us the direction of the suitable sampling technique to be adopted in this in the type of research, in the kind of research that we are going to do. Next is the analysis of the data. Next step. What is that? It includes processing of the data. We have collected the data, but it is haphazard. It has to be systematized. How do we systematize it? For that, we have the classification, we have the codification process, we have the editing process, we have the tabulation process, we have the various kind of graphs to depict these data. So this processing is first very necessary, because then only we can have these data in which can be analyzed or which can be understood by any other person. So it is the research design which has already decided how the processing would be done, and then the analysis of the data. Analysis of the data can be done through some kind of statistical techniques also, which are plentifully available, and they can be done through various kind of conceptual frameworks which are also available, and the data which we analyze through either the statistical framework or the various kind of conceptual framework would provide us which are really affecting or influencing the phenomenon or the issue or the problem that we have undertaken for research. The analysis also includes testing of the hypothesis, because the hypothesis has been set up by us. It has to be tested, either to be rejected or to be accepted, either to be proved wrong or to be proved right. Then only we can come to a conclusion. This is also, hypothesis testing is also a kind of comes into the analysis of the data. So this step, analyzing the data, has been done. So the next step would be to draw the conclusions. We had set up the hypothesis in the very beginning. Now from the last step, analysis of the data, we have already tested the hypothesis. It would be either rejected or accepted. If it has been rejected, if the null hypothesis has been rejected, the alternative will be accepted. And if the null has been accepted, the alternative will be rejected. So we have the confirmed results. We have the confirmed results. And maybe in some cases, we are unable to clearly confirm the finding. That should also come up. So the conclusion that we have researched upon, and we can claim that This in future it can be developed into theory, and we can claim that there is a new knowledge on the subject, and one can claim that the further research he can or she can extend further research on the subject. So that was the seventh step. The eighth step is the replication of the study. Replicate the study. What is replication? That the experiment should be repeated again and again. It should be open to be researched by any, confirmed by any other organization or individual. Because a finding can only be universalized when in various repetitions and various replications the result is supported. And if it is not supported, then the result cannot be universalized. So the outcome of, so that the conclusions that a researcher has found is confirmed again and again, and the findings of the research are universally true, and accept it in the next lecture. Thank you very much.